Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. So this will be a continuation of the series I started, and this one will focus on the Paladin slash fighter type, the chap in the suit of armor on the left. Again, as I said in the previous video, I'm just going to use mostly my middle of the road game color range. I'm going to focus on low to mid tabletop quality, something that a comparative newcomer can bang out without complex tools or techniques. And I'm also restricting myself to some of my cheaper and less precise gear. Anyway, let's get on with it. So to start with, we have to do the main armor, and it's pretty obvious what we're just going to do. I'm not even being really neat, just using a fairly rough old brush to just sort of half brush, half stipple on the metallic color, just to work it into all the deep crevices on the armor. Because just looking at this guy, there's some chainmail and there's some armor plates. That's the majority of the figure, which makes the initial base coating stage rather easy due to the nature of it. Just focus on getting 2 to 3 even coats, and then you're pretty much done. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration, because there's a lot more work to do with the metallics to make them look good. You can also see this is a first for me. I normally don't do this, but I left the shield off for painting. What I'm doing, obviously, is I've just got a bit of blue tack, which I'm using to hold it there, and I'll move that blue tack around as I paint various areas. So obviously the lining of the shield, edging of the shield, I'm going to do in metal. Again, want to double coat this to make sure you've really covered off all of the cracks. And I'm also going over the sword as well, even though I will be adding in a few other metallic colors at some point. Basically, my preference for metals is I always start with a fairly middle of the range gunmetal type color, and then I adjust it by layering the other metal colors over. I find this produces a far more vibrant result. Okay, we're on our next stage of color. At this point, I am overbrushing the miniature with Vallejo Game Color Chainmail, which is a slightly upgraded, brighter metallic. The idea is I want to get the higher points, the exposed plates, to make them look like they're shiny and well maintained, while leave the more recessed metallics on the original darker metallic color. So yeah, and this also includes going over the sword. I'm also going to use this color as the basis for the sword. Anyway, so that's all quite simple. So the main trick is just to not glob on the paint. Just make sure you get an even layer of metallics, and then we just move on to the wash. Just one layer of wash, don't let it pool too much. Simple. Okay, so I am dry brushing chainmail over the dried result, just to again pick out or re-establish the metallic sheen for all the higher areas, and just to get that, good metallic luster going. I will say though, these are middle of the road metallic paints, so they're not going to be as good as some of the higher end things that you can get. So yeah, for the kind of product this is, I think it's pretty good. Anyway, the armor, would you believe, is mostly done, so a fairly simple piece to paint. Now it's just a matter of adding in the non-metallics, which is obviously a bit of a chore. So to start with, we're doing his tabard thing. I honestly don't know the actual name for it. And I'm just going to do the entire thing a white cloth, apart from the insignia on his chest, which we'll get to later on. Yeah, so it's a matter of just relayering it until we have fully concealed the metallic paint underneath it. Essentially, the colour that's going on is a fairly dark khaki that we're going to layer it up to eventually where it's pretty much an off-white. So this is just establishing, we're underpainting the colour here just to give something that'll that the white will adhere to better, essentially. And while I'm here, I'm also going to start working on the belt, which I'm just going to do the with one of the leather colours I was using for the previous, for the other miniatures in this series. So I already had the paint on the palette. I thought may as well use it because ultimately I am kind of lazy, and you know I do like the darker reds for a lot of my leather colours. I just think it just looks real good. Alright, so I'm also painting that little purity seal thing, just the base khaki colour, and that is going to be the base coat for that particular piece. Alright, so the shield, the main shield face, I'm painting red because I'm going to do the insignia on his tabard red as well, so I wanted to keep some consistency of colour and minimise my palette with these miniatures. I often find that that's generally the best, and certainly easier than just having 1,000 paints out and having to remember each distinct colour that you've been using. Now, like most paints from, well, a lot of paints from this range, it's very transparent, which is great for achieving gradients, but for getting an even base coat, it takes time. So patience is definitely a virtue here. Just put a layer down, wait for it to dry, do it again, and repeat until you're happy with the coverage. Remember, this is a feature of the paint. If it goes on in one coat, then by the nature of that, product, it's going to be harder to do things like layering and blending colors and establishing gradients. So I'm working on the reds now. As I mentioned previously, the wax seal of the purity seal, like red, it's there, it's easy to use. And I'm also just doing the insignia. Now, I'm going to be overpainting this a bunch. This is just mostly for... I was more experimenting at this point, just seeing how it would look at this stage, because, I will be relayering the white over it. I'll get a lot on that seal, and I'll have to repaint the red, so, it's part of the course. And, of course, continuing to slowly build up the layers on that shield, and you'll notice that I've reached a point where I didn't much care to preserve the metallics I've already painted on the little studs. In the end, I just went back and repainted them metallic once I was done, because the entire thing's getting a fresh shading layer anyway. Okay, so on to the white. So this is the off-white colour I was talking about previously, and you can see it's pretty much not going on quite evenly, even with the khaki underpainting, so this will take a couple of passes before I am satisfied with the result. So yeah, same deal as before, and you can see, as I said, I've made a mess of the red on the insignia, and I'm just going to go back and redo that later on. Now this is about the second or third pass, and as you can see the colour is starting to go on a bit more solidly now, which is good. And that pretty much is the end of it there. This entire section will be soon ready for a an overall wash of Agros Earthshade to establish some, give it more of a dirty look and just establish some depth with those colours. And there we are. We have just added the red back in after layering on the white again. Many layers of white. In the end, I think it was 4 or 5. Oh, and just as quickly, I realized some metallic was painted on the face of the helmet, so I just filled it in with black to make it look well and truly in shade and shadow. And as you can see, building up the red on that shield has been an endeavour in itself. I've lost count of the amount of coats that have gone on it. I think at this point it's over 7 or so. Okay, so switching back to other metallics, I'm going to start doing the gold and other various parts. So you can see I'm just pretty much painting the gold straight over various parts on the miniature. I'm doing this with those other things because I'm also shading the gold, bronze, whatever it is, in Agros Earthshade as well. So I'm going to do a lot of them together. So that's pretty much it, just thin layer it over the metallics just to give it that different coloured sheen. And as you can see, I made a mess of the belt buckle, so I'm just going to go back and clean up my mistakes before the final wash stage happens. And look, there I am repainting all of the studs on the shield. I didn't follow my own advice here though, and I just painted the metallic neat on the insignia. I just had it on the palette, so I just did it, and it looks okay, well enough, and it's all going to get shaded anyway. So the downside to doing it over a colour is that you have to take a few passes for it to get on and lay it on properly. Alright, so again, shading isn't too hard, just put it on, try and keep it off the things you've already shaded and done, and yeah, just make sure it doesn't pool and clean up any excess before you set it to dry. It's quite simple really if you've done any work with GW styles of paint for any length of time. Alright, so we're commencing the layering of the tabard. As you can see, I'm just basically in a sort of painterly fashion, just going over the various areas and sort of leaving the shaded cloth in the recesses where it should be. There isn't a lot of definition or sculpted onto the figure, so I have to do what I can with just brush painting to sell the illusion of depth. So yep, you can see how I'm clearly just building up the color again, taking my time and doing a layer, letting it dry, relayer, and repeat until the final result is acceptable. And here we are. We're going to relayer the red now. So, yep, just again, since the red was like slightly affected by the wash, going to relayer it and try to leave the deepest recesses still affected and to establish that depth. And also we're going to quickly paint the parchment. Again, just rebasing it with khaki rather than going full white, because we want to create the look of like slightly dirty medieval paper, I guess. And for the shield, of course, now that we've shaded our 7 odd coats of red work, we're going to re-establish the midtones, generally in the large flat areas where there's red, and try to leave it alone where it's butting up against another detail, just to sell the illusion of depth and maybe a bit of griminess and dirtiness. And I did just notice that I saw some sort of like raised relief around the face mask, so I thought I'd also give that a coat of the bronze gold, kind of yellow metal metallic, just to give it a bit more visual interest, and I like the look of it. Okay, so on to highlighting. So this is basically with almost pure white. I'm just going over all of the sharp edges of the cloth and all of the folds, just establishing those final layer highlights. And yeah, we're done. As you can see though, it's quite difficult for this miniature because those details aren't really sculpted in, so I have to be fairly precise with my brush work. And that means if I make a mistake, going back over with some water just to quickly rub out what I've done, wait for it to dry, then try again. Yeah, and I'm also broke my promise to myself to use my crappier brushes, and I've gone for a fairly higher quality Winsor & Newton to do this highlighting. Again, I think any painter should probably have at least 2 Winsor & Newtons, a size 1 and a size 2, and don't break them out until you do highlighting. Everything else, use your cheap brushes, because the Most wear and tear on the brushes comes from painting base coats and metallics. If you want to extend the life of your expensive brushes, save them for highlighting. And of course we're going to highlight our red just a little bit. Yep, just building it up slowly on the very tips of the insignia and on the top curve of the wax seal. And of course the belt, all I'm doing is mixing a little bit of white with the original terracotta, I believe, color that we used. I used for the leather, and you can already see that I've already painted at some point the string holding that little charm together to his back. So that'll get, I think, just a very thin highlight of white along the way. And of course, yeah, I went back and put a little bit of wash on that raised relief around the visor to raised relief is there's no such thing. That raised detail above the visor to shade that gold a little bit. And of course, you just saw me quickly re-establish some of the sheen on the insignia on the shield. Just putting it on the topmost surfaces and generally leaving it alone elsewhere. And of course, once let it dried, revisited and did a whole bunch more highlighting, just making it shine a little more. Now, I'm not sure if it's necessarily obvious, but since the shield itself is a fairly larger piece of gold metal, I find that you can actually do a lot more highlighting, even all the way up to silver, to get that metallic sheen going. I'm also putting a little bit of metallic highlighting on the figure itself, all of the various gold bits. And now, as promised, I am switching over to the back side of the shield. So yep, I'm just going to paint this wood and that, cloth leather flappy thing some fabric color, and we're almost pretty much done, to be honest. Now here I was playing around with the colors a little bit. Wait for it. Experimenting with the basing, so I thought this might have looked like dirt and ground, but I ended up going for a rocky base. So as you can see, I basically gave up halfway through, and yeah, came back to it later. But yeah, just like painting the front of the shield, oh yeah, painting the back is just as much of a time sink, like many layers to establish that final mid-tone to work with. And as I said previously, going back over the base with just my usual basing method, I think I might have skipped painting the actual base. So the original coat was like a very dark grey. I used Filet model color German grey, and then like put a like overbrushed a mid-tone. And as you can see, like I'm quickly putting the wash on the shield. That's pretty much was already done. And yeah, at some point it'll get a highlight, a slightly lighter highlight of I think some very light grey. And of course, sorry, it's going a bit too fast now, sketched in some just like lettering on the purity seal. And with that, we are rapidly approaching completion. Now for the shield, I was a bit lazy and I don't recall doing more detailing on the back of the shield. I just left it as shaded. Of course, just fixing up the edging on the shield there just to make sure none of the paint we applied in the final steps overlaps with the metal rimming. And here we go, the final step to complete the miniature. Just got some super glue and fixing the shield to his other hand, letting it set, and there we go. Wait, there's one thing which needs to be finished off. There we go, now we're done. And that's it. That is our fighter Paladin completed. As you can see, he's lined up there with the rest of the miniatures for this pass, and yeah. So, like, it's definitely not a competition piece. It's not even a competition like grade sculpt. It's just a fun little miniature that you can throw together for your D&D campaign. I think the total work time may have been maybe a couple of hours. But what I usually do is I have a couple of other miniatures on the go, so I can do another thing while one stage is drying. Especially given the number of layers doing that shield and that tabard, definitely having something else to go and do while that's drying is, I think, fairly important for just, you know, you're making best use of your time while at your hobby desk. So that's pretty much it. If you've made it this far into the video, I hope you've gotten something out of this to improve your own painting, whether you're reasonably experienced or just starting out. I hope watching me go through the process for putting paint onto plastic helps you with your own endeavors. So I think I'll wrap it up now. Again, cheers, and I hope this was useful.